You're sitting across from someone you thought you knew, a colleague, a friend, maybe even your partner. They seem genuine, trustworthy, put together, but something feels off. You can't put your finger on it, but your instincts are screaming that there's more beneath the surface. That feeling isn't paranoia. It's pattern recognition. Your unconscious mind is picking up on subtle inconsistencies that your conscious mind hasn't yet processed. Carl Jung spent his entire career studying this phenomenon, and what he discovered will change how you see every person in your life, including yourself. Jung called it the persona, the mask we all wear to navigate the world, not because we're inherently deceptive, but because survival in society demands it. From childhood, we learn which parts of ourselves are acceptable and which parts need to be hidden. We construct an image, carefully managed, constantly maintained. The confident professional, the caring friend, the devoted partner. These aren't lies exactly. They're selective truths. But Jung discovered something remarkable. No matter how carefully someone constructs their image, two specific psychological patterns always slip through. These aren't complex psychological tests or manipulative tactics. They're simple observations that expose our deepest truths without us even realizing it. Think about the last time someone's behavior confused you. They said all the right things. Their actions seemed appropriate, yet something felt misaligned. That misalignment is the gap between persona and authentic self. And once you understand Jung's two reveals, you'll never miss these gaps again. The first reveal shows you what someone has rejected in themselves. The second shows you who they become when their mask can't hold. Together, they create a complete picture of someone's authentic character. Not who they pretend to be, but who they actually are beneath the performance. Most people go through life believing they can judge character through surface behaviors. They look for confidence, kindness, success. But Jung understood these are all part of the performance layer. The real person lives beneath this performance, in the patterns they can't consciously control. What makes this knowledge so powerful and so unsettling is that these patterns operate in all of us. As you learn to see through others' masks, you'll inevitably confront your own. Jung wrote that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. These two reveals don't just expose other people's hidden nature. They force you to confront parts of yourself you've been avoiding. The persona serves a protective function. It helps us belong, succeed, avoid rejection. But it also creates a fundamental disconnect between who we are and who we pretend to be. This disconnect generates the very patterns Jung identified. Patterns that leak through no matter how hard we try to maintain our image. Every interaction becomes a dance of personas, each person managing their image while trying to decode the others. We exhaust ourselves maintaining these masks, yet we can't seem to stop. The fear of being truly seen feels too great. But what if that fear is misplaced? What if the energy we spend hiding ourselves is the very thing preventing genuine connection? Jung's two reveals cut through this exhausting performance. They show you what's real beneath what's presented. Not to judge or manipulate, but to understand. Because when you can see someone's authentic patterns, their struggles, their fears, their rejected aspects, you stop relating to their mask and start connecting with their humanity. The implications ripple through every relationship. That colleague who triggers your anger might be showing you something about yourself. Your partner's defensive patterns might reveal wounds you've both been avoiding. Your own reactions to others become data about your internal landscape. This isn't about becoming a cynical analyzer of human behavior. It's about developing what Jung called conscious sight, the ability to see clearly without judgment, to understand deeply without manipulation. It's about recognizing that everyone, including you, is fighting an internal battle between who they are and who they think they need to be. As we explore Jung's two reveals, remember, this knowledge comes with responsibility. The ability to see through personas can be used to harm or to heal, to distance yourself or to deepen connection. The choice is yours, but once you see these patterns, you can never unsee them. Your relationships, your self-understanding, your entire experience of human interaction will transform. The question isn't whether you're ready for this knowledge. The question is whether you're tired enough of surface-level existence to risk seeing what lies beneath, in others, and inevitably, in yourself. The first reveal. What you hate in others. Carl Jung discovered that what irritates you most about other people is actually a mirror showing you the parts of yourself you've buried deepest. This isn't metaphorical. It's psychological law. When someone triggers an intense emotional reaction in you, not mild annoyance, but that hot, visceral anger or deep disgust, you're not seeing them clearly. You're seeing your own shadow projected onto them like a film onto a screen. Jung called this shadow projection, and it's the first reliable way to see someone's true character, not by analyzing them directly, but by observing what they judge most harshly in others. The stronger the emotional charge, the closer you're getting to their deepest rejected material. Let me show you how this works. Think about someone who absolutely infuriates you. Not someone who's harmed you directly, but someone whose very way of being triggers you. Maybe it's their arrogance, their neediness, their fake positivity, their selfishness. Feel that emotional charge rising as you think about them. That's your shadow activating. Here's what's actually happening. Early in life, you learned that certain traits were unacceptable. Maybe expressing confidence got you labeled as arrogant, so you buried your natural assertiveness. Maybe needing others led to rejection, so you disowned your vulnerability. These rejected aspects didn't disappear. They went underground, into what Jung called the shadow, the repository of everything we've decided we're not allowed to be. But the psyche seeks wholeness. These buried parts want expression. Since you won't allow them conscious expression in yourself, your unconscious finds them in others and reacts with disproportionate intensity. You're not angry at them. You're angry at the part of yourself they represent. Watch someone in the grip of shadow projection. Their whole body changes. Their voice sharpens. Their face contorts. They can spend hours dissecting why that person is so wrong, so toxic, so problematic. The energy they pour into this criticism reveals how much psychic effort they're using to keep that same trait suppressed in themselves. I knew a manager, David, who constantly complained about his colleague Marcus. "He's so fake," David would say, his jaw tightening. Always charming clients, putting on that performance. David prided himself on being genuine, authentic, real. But watch David in important meetings. He became stiff, formal, desperately professional. He'd rejected his own capacity for social ease so completely that seeing it in Marcus felt like torture. This is the shadow's cruel irony. We often hate in others what we secretly long to express ourselves. David didn't really hate Marcus's charm. He hated that he'd forbidden himself from being charming. He'd labeled it fake to justify his rejection of it, then projected that judgment onto anyone who embodied what he'd disowned. The shadow projection reveals character because it shows what someone's been running from their entire life. A person who constantly criticizes others for being weak has usually buried their own vulnerability so deep they can't access it. Someone who rages against selfish people has often suppressed their own needs to the point of self-abandonment. The judgments we make are confessions we don't realize we're making. But here's where it gets even more revealing. We don't just project negative traits. We also project positive qualities we're afraid to claim. When someone consistently puts others on pedestals, "She's so confident, I could never be like that," or "He's so creative, I'm just ordinary." They're projecting capabilities they possess but won't acknowledge. This positive projection is still shadow material. It represents aspects of ourselves we've decided we're not allowed to own. Maybe claiming your intelligence feels arrogant. Maybe acknowledging your attractiveness seems vain. So you project these qualities onto others and worship them from afar, not realizing you're worshiping your own disowned potential. The intensity is always the tell. Mild preferences or observations don't indicate shadow projection. It's the disproportionate reactions, the rants, the obsessions, the people you can't stop thinking about, that reveal your shadow. If you find yourself constantly returning to how annoying, impressive, or problematic someone is, you're looking at your own rejected material. This is why shadow mapping works so reliably for character assessment. People can control their words, manage their expressions, craft their responses, but they can't control what triggers their shadow. Those intense reactions bypass all conscious filters and reveal what they've spent their lives trying to hide, especially from themselves. Understanding shadow projection transforms how you see every human interaction. That person ranting about social media narcissists, they're revealing their own relationship with attention and validation. The one who can't stop criticizing ambitious people, they're showing you their own suppressed desires for success and recognition. But the most profound revelation comes when you turn this understanding inward. Every time you judge someone harshly, you're being handed a map to your own unconscious. Your irritations become information. Your triggers become teachers. The people who bother you most are showing you the parts of yourself you've abandoned. This isn't comfortable knowledge. Seeing your own projections means admitting that many of your strong opinions about others are actually unresolved conflicts within yourself. It means acknowledging that your moral high ground might be built on rejected aspects of your own nature. It means recognizing that you're not as different from those you judge as you'd like to believe. Yet this discomfort is the doorway to wholeness. Because once you see your projections, you can begin reclaiming your shadow. You can stop wasting energy judging others for expressing what you won't allow in yourself. You can begin the work of integration, becoming complete rather than perfect. The second reveal, when the mask cracks. You want to know someone's true character. Don't watch them when they're prepared. Watch what happens when their carefully constructed image is threatened. Jung discovered that authentic character emerges not in managed moments, but in the spaces between, when the persona cracks under unexpected pressure. These cracks reveal more truth than years of controlled interaction, because they show us who someone becomes when their mask can't hold. The persona requires constant energy to maintain. Like holding a smile for too long, eventually the muscles fatigue and authentic expression breaks through. Jung identified specific moments when this breakdown reliably occurs. Unexpected criticism, public mistakes, loss of control over their narrative, challenges to their competence, or any situation where their cultivated image is questioned. In these moments, primitive patterns emerge. The polished executive becomes a cornered animal. The spiritual teacher turns venomous. The confident leader crumbles into insecurity. These aren't character flaws, they're character reveals. They show us which psychological patterns govern someone when their conscious management system fails. I witnessed this with Sarah, a marketing director known for her unshakable calm. She'd built her entire career on being the composed one, the professional who never lost her cool. But during a high-stakes client presentation, the client directly challenged her strategy. "This feels amateur," he said. "I expected better. Watch what happened." Sarah's face flushed. Her voice, usually modulated and warm, became sharp as glass. She interrupted the client mid-sentence. She threw subtle blame at her team. She made veiled references to the client's inability to understand sophisticated strategies. The calm professional vanished, replaced by someone defensive, insecure, and willing to sacrifice others to protect her image. This wasn't Sarah having a bad day. This was Sarah's authentic character pattern emerging under threat. When her carefully maintained persona of competence was challenged, her core psychological structure revealed itself, a deep terror of being seen as inadequate, managed through attack and deflection rather than integration. Jung understood that we all have these breaking points. The question isn't whether someone will crack under pressure, it's how they crack. Do they attack, revealing underlying aggression? Do they collapse, showing fragility beneath bravado? Do they deflect, indicating dishonesty patterns? Or do they pause, breathe, and respond from a place of integration? The way someone handles persona threat reveals their relationship with their own shadow. Those who attack when criticized are usually projecting their own self-criticism outward. Those who crumble have often built their entire identity on external validation. Those who deflect can't tolerate the discomfort of imperfection. But those who can acknowledge the criticism, sit with discomfort, and respond thoughtfully, they've done the work of integration. These patterns show up in micro moments throughout daily life. Someone's phone dies and they panic, revealing dependency on digital validation. They're kept waiting and become irritated, showing entitlement patterns. Someone doesn't laugh at their joke and they make a cutting remark, exposing insecurity about their worth. Most people miss these reveals because they happen fast. The mask slips for seconds before being hastily readjusted, but once you know what to look for, you see them everywhere. The flash of contempt before the practiced smile returns. The moment of panic before confidence is reasserted. The brief collapse before the walls go back up. What makes persona breakdown so reliable for character assessment is that it bypasses intention. Someone can intend to be kind, professional, or confident, but when their image is threatened, intention dissolves and pattern takes over. They default to whatever defensive strategy they learned earliest and practiced longest. This is why some people become more authentic under pressure, while others become less so. Those who've integrated their shadow don't need to defend an image. They can acknowledge their imperfections without existential threat. But those still identified with their persona experience any crack as potential annihilation. Jung wrote that neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. The suffering of having our false image challenged is legitimate. It forces us to face the gap between who we are and who we pretend to be. Those who refuse this suffering, who defend their persona at all costs, remain trapped in patterns of defensiveness and projection. But here's the profound insight. Everyone's mask cracks eventually. No one can maintain their persona perfectly forever. The question is whether these cracks lead to breakdown or breakthrough. Do they use the exposure to deepen their authenticity, or do they frantically patch the mask and pretend nothing happened? Watching someone's persona crack isn't about catching them in failure. It's about seeing their humanity, their fears, their wounds, their desperate desire to be acceptable. When you can observe these moments with compassion rather than judgment, you see not character flaws but character struggles. The most integrated people show consistency between their persona and their pressure responses. Not because they never crack, but because they've made friends with their cracks. They've accepted their imperfections, integrated their shadows, and no longer need to defend an image of perfection. This is the second reveal, not who someone chooses to be when prepared, but who they can't help being when unprepared. It's in these unguarded moments that authentic character emerges, showing us not their performance, but their truth. Why these patterns never lie. The unconscious mind processes 11 million bits of information per second, while the conscious mind handles only 40. This is why Jung's two reveals work. They tap into patterns that operate far below the threshold of conscious control. Think about that ratio. For every piece of information you're consciously aware of, your unconscious is processing 275,000 others. This vast underground system runs on patterns laid down in your earliest years, before you had words to describe them or consciousness to choose them. These patterns form what neuroscientists now call implicit memory. Behavioral and emotional responses encoded before explicit memory comes online. When you were 2 years old and expressing anger got you rejected, your nervous system learned. Anger equals danger. This learning happened not in your thinking brain, but in your survival brain, below the level of conscious access. Years later, you think you're choosing to be calm and controlled, but you're not choosing. You're running an ancient program. When someone expresses healthy anger, your shadow projection activates. When your own anger threatens to emerge, your persona defenses engage. These aren't conscious decisions. They're unconscious patterns firing faster than thought. This is why you can't fake your way past Jung's reveals. You can consciously decide to not judge someone, but if they embody your shadow material, your body will react. Your jaw might tighten, your breathing changes, micro-expressions flash across your face. These responses happen in milliseconds before your conscious mind can intervene. The ego, our conscious sense of self, expends enormous energy maintaining our preferred self-image. Jung understood this as psychic economics. We have limited psychological energy, and maintaining a false persona is expensive. It requires constant vigilance, continuous adjustment, perpetual management of others' perceptions. Under stress, this system becomes unsustainable. The ego can't maintain its defenses when flooded with cortisol, when surprised by criticism, when triggered by shadow material. In these moments, older patterns take over, patterns that predate our persona, that live in the basement of our psychology. This is observable in brain imaging. When someone encounters their shadow projections, the amygdala activates before the prefrontal cortex can regulate. When persona threat occurs, stress hormones flood the system faster than executive function can manage. The primitive brain takes over, revealing patterns that conscious control can't mask. Jung intuited what neuroscience now confirms. Authentic character lives in these unconscious patterns, not in what we consciously choose to present, but in what emerges when choice is overwhelmed by activation. The patterns that surface in these moments are our true psychological infrastructure. Consider how early these patterns form. Before age 7, we're in what developmental psychologists call the imprint period. Our brains are specifically designed to absorb environmental patterns without question. If expressing joy led to ridicule, we learn to suppress it. If being vulnerable led to abandonment, we learn to armor ourselves. These learnings became our unconscious operating system. This is why two people can witness the same behavior and have completely different reactions. One person sees confidence and feels inspired. Another sees the same confidence and feels triggered. The difference isn't in what they're seeing, it's in what unconscious patterns are activated by what they see. Jung's genius was recognizing that these patterns create predictable signatures. Someone who learned that needing others leads to abandonment will consistently judge needy people harshly. Someone who learned that standing out leads to attack will react strongly to those who seek attention. The specific content varies, but the pattern remains consistent. The reliability comes from the autonomic nature of these responses. You can't consciously decide not to have a shadow. You can't will yourself to not feel triggered. You can't think your way out of patterns encoded before you could think. This is why Jung's reveals work across cultures, personalities, and conscious beliefs. They tap into human universals encoded at the deepest levels. What makes this knowledge transformative is understanding that these patterns aren't fixed. Jung discovered that by making the unconscious conscious, we can begin to work with these patterns rather than be controlled by them. But first we must see them, and we see them most clearly in those moments when our conscious control fails and our authentic patterns emerge. This is the profound truth beneath Jung's framework. We're all running on programs we didn't consciously choose, reacting to present moments through past patterns, projecting internal conflicts onto external screens. The patterns never lie because they can't. They predate our capacity for deception, living in the parts of us that formed before we learned to hide. The mirror you can't escape. What if every person who triggers you is actually showing you a piece of yourself you've been running from your entire life? This isn't a comfortable question. It suggests that your righteous anger at others' selfishness might be about your own suppressed needs. That your irritation with attention seekers could reveal your own unmet desire to be seen. That every harsh judgment you make is a confession about your own inner conflict. Jung called this the mirror effect, and it's perhaps the most confronting aspect of his work. We can only recognize in others what exists as potential within ourselves. This doesn't mean we are what we judge. It means we contain the capacity for what we judge, and that capacity disturbs us so deeply we've banished it to the unconscious. Think about it neurologically. For you to recognize arrogance in another person, you must have neural patterns that understand arrogance. These patterns didn't come from nowhere. They form through your own experience with those impulses you may have expressed once and been shamed for, or witnessed and decided were dangerous. Every judgment is a recognition. Every trigger is a mirror. Every strong emotional reaction to another person is your unconscious saying, "This is important. This is about you. Pay attention." I learned this viscerally through my own projections. For years, I was triggered by people who seemed fake on social media. The carefully curated lives, the performative vulnerability, the strategic authenticity. I could rant for hours about the narcissism of it all. Until one day, mid-judgment, a question arose. What if I'm angry because I want to be seen too? The recognition hit like cold water. I had been performing my own version of authenticity, the person who was too real for social media, too deep for surface-level sharing. But this was just another performance, another mask. My judgment of others' desire for visibility was actually about my own unmet longing for witness, which I'd buried under layers of intellectual superiority. This is how the mirror works. It's not that I was secretly exactly like those I judged. It's that we were wrestling with the same human need, the desire to be seen and valued, but had chosen opposite strategies. They performed visibility. I performed invisibility. Both were attempts to manage the same vulnerability. The mirror effect operates constantly. In every interaction, we're not just seeing others, we're seeing aspects of ourselves reflected back. The colleague who annoys you with their indecisiveness might be showing you your own difficulty with uncertainty. The friend whose boundaries feel harsh might be reflecting your own struggles with self-protection. This recognition transforms everything. Suddenly the world stops being full of problematic people and starts being full of teachers. Each person who triggers you is offering information about your own unintegrated material. Each judgment becomes a doorway to self-discovery. But here's what makes the mirror effect so powerful. It works in all directions. The qualities you admire in others also reflect your own potential. When you're moved by someone's courage, you're recognizing courage within yourself. When you're inspired by someone's creativity, you're seeing your own creative capacity. We can't recognize in others what doesn't exist in ourselves. This is why certain people feel like home. They mirror back aspects of ourselves we've embraced. And why others feel like sandpaper. They reflect what we've rejected. Both are equally valuable for understanding our whole self. The mirror can't be escaped because it's not outside us. It's the very mechanism of perception. We see through the lens of our own psychology. Every observation is filtered through our patterns, our shadows, our potential. What we see in others reveals as much about us as it does about them. The dark side of seeing clearly. There's a loneliness that comes with seeing through everyone's masks, including your own. Once you understand these patterns, you can never go back to comfortable unconsciousness. This is the shadow side of psychological awareness that Jung warned about. When you develop the ability to see projections and persona patterns, you risk becoming what I call a shadow hunter, someone who uses psychological insight as a weapon rather than a tool for understanding. The temptation is real. Once you can spot others' projections, it's easy to feel superior. Look at them, so unconscious, so trapped in their patterns. But this superiority is itself a shadow projection. You're projecting your own disowned unconsciousness onto others, using your knowledge to maintain distance rather than create connection. I've watched people destroy relationships with this knowledge. They become psychological prosecutors, constantly pointing out others' shadows, analyzing every behavior, turning every conversation into a therapy session nobody asked for. They use Jung's insights to avoid their own vulnerability by keeping others at arm's length through analysis. The danger deepens when you realize you can use this knowledge for manipulation. If you know someone's shadow material, you can trigger them intentionally. If you understand their persona structure, you can threaten it strategically. This is psychological violence, using someone's unconscious patterns against them. Jung understood this danger intimately. He wrote about the inflation that comes with psychological knowledge, the ego's tendency to identify with insight and use it for power rather than wisdom. When you can see others' patterns clearly, you might start believing you're beyond such patterns yourself. This is the ultimate shadow projection, projecting unconsciousness onto everyone else while believing you're fully conscious. The loneliness comes from multiple sources. First, you can't unsee what you've seen. Once you recognize projection and persona patterns, every interaction reveals them. The social games that others play unconsciously become visible and often unbearable. Small talk feels like persona performance. Group dynamics reveal collective shadow projections. Second, you become isolated by your own awareness. When you're no longer willing to participate in unconscious patterns, the gossiping that bonds co-workers, the shared judgments that create tribal belonging, the mutual persona reinforcement that passes for friendship, you can feel profoundly alone. Third, there's the burden of seeing others' pain clearly. Behind every rigid persona, you see the wounds it protects. Within every harsh projection, you recognize the rejected self. This clarity can be overwhelming. You understand why people behave as they do, but you can't necessarily help them see it themselves. The ethical weight is real. With great insight comes great responsibility. How do you use this knowledge? Do you share what you see, risking relationship rupture? Do you stay silent, feeling complicit in others' unconscious patterns? Do you withdraw, protecting yourself from the weight of seeing too much? Jung's answer was integration and compassion. The goal isn't to become a detached observer of human psychology, but to use understanding in service of connection. See the patterns, yes, but see them with humility, remembering that you too have shadows. You too wear masks. You too are human. The antidote to shadow hunting is shadow befriending. Instead of using psychological insight to elevate yourself above others, use it to recognize your common humanity. Everyone is fighting the same battle between authentic self and protective persona. Everyone carries rejected aspects that emerge as projections, Everyone is doing their best with the consciousness they have. True psychological maturity means holding this knowledge lightly. Yes, you can see patterns others miss, but this sight is meant to increase compassion, not decrease it. The goal isn't to be the most conscious person in the room, but to use whatever consciousness you have to create more authentic connection. From recognition to transformation, Sarah noticed she constantly criticized her sister for being fake on social media. One day, mid-judgment, she stopped. What if I'm the one who's afraid to be seen? That moment changed everything. This is how transformation begins, not with grand revelations, but with small moments of catching yourself in the act. Sarah had spent years building a case against her sister's attention-seeking behavior. She had evidence, the staged photos, the humble brags, the curated vulnerability. But in that moment of pause, she saw something else entirely. She saw her own fear. Fear of judgment if she shared her achievements. Fear of rejection if she showed her struggles. Fear of being seen as too much if she took up space. Her sister wasn't the problem. Her sister was the mirror, showing Sarah all the ways she'd made herself invisible to avoid the vulnerability of being witnessed. This is the pivot point Jung described, when recognition becomes integration. It's not enough to intellectually understand your projections. Transformation requires feeling the truth of them in your body, acknowledging the disowned parts of yourself, and beginning the uncomfortable work of reclamation. The process follows predictable stages. First comes recognition, that jarring moment when you see your own shadow in what you're judging. For Sarah, it was realizing her anger at her sister's visibility was really about her own hiding. Next comes resistance. The ego doesn't surrender easily. Sarah's mind immediately produced counter-arguments. But I'm not fake like her. I have integrity. I don't need external validation. This resistance is the persona fighting for survival, trying to maintain the identity structure you've built. Then comes grief. When Sarah let herself feel the truth, that she'd been hiding her whole life, that she'd rejected her own need to be seen, sadness flooded in. All those unexpressed moments, all that withheld authenticity, all the connection she'd prevented by staying invisible. This grief is necessary. You're mourning the self you didn't allow yourself to be. After grief comes curiosity. What would it be like, Sarah wondered, to actually let people see me? Not in her sister's way, but in her own way. What would authentic visibility look like for her? This curiosity marks the beginning of integration, exploring how to embody what you've rejected without swinging to the opposite extreme. Integration isn't about becoming what you judged. Sarah didn't start posting staged photos and humble brags. Instead, she began sharing her actual thoughts, her real struggles, her genuine victories. She found her own way of being visible that honored both her need to be seen and her value of authenticity. The transformation rippled outward. As Sarah stopped judging her sister's visibility, their relationship shifted. Without the wall of projection between them, real conversation became possible. Sarah could appreciate her sister's courage in putting herself out there, while her sister could respect Sarah's more private nature. They weren't opposites anymore. They were two people navigating the same human need in different ways. This is how shadow work actually works. You don't eliminate your shadows or become someone else. You expand your range. Where before Sarah could only be invisible, now she had choice. She could be private when that served her, and visible when that felt right. The shadow material, the desire to be seen, was integrated as capacity rather than compulsion, but integration requires practice. Old patterns don't dissolve overnight. Sarah had to catch herself repeatedly falling back into judgment and invisibility. Each time she'd pause, breathe, and ask, what am I rejecting in myself right now? Each time, the answer revealed another layer of shadow material to integrate. The practice extends beyond personal shadows to collective ones. Once you start integrating your own projections, you see how entire groups project shadows onto other groups. Political parties, generations, cultures, all engaging in massive projection games, fighting their own rejected qualities in others. This awareness brings responsibility. When you start participating in collective projections, you disrupt the system. People might pressure you to join their judgments, to reinforce their shadows. Your integration threatens their projection structure. This is where the real work lies, maintaining your integrated stance without judging others for their projections. Jung called this process individuation, becoming whole rather than good. It's not about perfection, but about inclusion, including your shadows, your difficult emotions, your rejected aspects. Not acting them out unconsciously, but holding them consciously as part of your full humanity. The paradox is that integration makes you more yourself, not less. When Sarah included her need for visibility, she didn't become her sister. She became a fuller version of herself, someone who could choose visibility or privacy based on authentic impulse rather than shadow-driven compulsion. This is the promise of shadow work. Not that you'll become a different person, but that you'll become all of who you are. Your triggers transform into teachers. Your projections become pathways to wholeness. Your judgments reveal your potential. And in that integration, genuine transformation becomes possible. The ripple effect of consciousness. The strangest thing happens when you stop playing unconscious games with others. Some people will hate you for it, while others will finally feel permission to be real. This paradox reveals the final truth about Jung's character assessment framework. When you integrate your shadows and drop your persona masks, you become a walking invitation for others to do the same. But not everyone wants that invitation. Some people's entire identity depends on maintaining their projections and personas. Your consciousness threatens their unconsciousness. Watch what happens when you stop participating in shadow projection. A group of colleagues starts gossiping about someone's arrogance, expecting you to join in. Instead of adding fuel, you say, "I notice I get triggered by confident people sometimes. I wonder what that's about for me." The room goes silent. Some people shift uncomfortably. Others lean in with curiosity. You've just disrupted a collective shadow ritual. Those who need the projection to avoid their own relationship with confidence will feel threatened. They might redirect their judgment toward you, calling you too analytical or no fun anymore. They're not really angry at you. They're angry that you're not helping them maintain their shadow structure. But notice who responds differently. Someone might quietly approach you later. "What you said really made me think. I've been judging confident people my whole life. Your willingness to own your shadow gave them permission to explore theirs." This is consciousness contagion. Your integration creates space for others' integration. The ripple effect operates in intimate relationships too. When you stop projecting onto your partner and start owning your shadows, the entire dynamic shifts. If you've been projecting your disowned anger onto them, calling them too aggressive, and you suddenly say, "I'm realizing I'm actually angry, and I've been making you carry it for me," everything changes. Some partners will resist this shift. If the relationship was built on mutual projection, you carrying their disowned qualities, them carrying yours, your integration destabilizes the whole system. They might escalate their projections, trying to restore the familiar dynamic. This is when relationships either evolve or end. But when both people are willing to do the work, magic happens. Instead of shadowboxing, fighting each other's projections, you become allies in consciousness. You help each other spot projections, integrate shadows, drop masks. The relationship transforms from unconscious entanglement to conscious partnership. This transformation extends to family systems. When you stop playing your assigned role, the responsible one, the problem child, the peacemaker, the entire family structure shakes. Some members will pressure you to return to your role. Others might feel free to leave theirs. Your consciousness creates possibility for the whole system to evolve. Jung understood that individual consciousness serves collective evolution. Every person who integrates their shadow removes that shadow from the collective field. Every person who drops their persona makes authentic relating more possible for everyone. We're all connected in what Jung called the collective unconscious. When one person becomes more conscious, it affects the whole. This is why the work matters beyond personal benefit. Yes, you'll have better relationships, clearer perception, more authentic self-expression, but you'll also contribute to the evolution of human consciousness itself. Each projection you reclaim, each mask you drop, each shadow you integrate makes the world a slightly more conscious place. The ripple effect isn't always visible. Someone might watch you handle criticism without defensiveness and later find themselves pausing before their usual reactive pattern. Someone might witness you owning a shadow projection and months later recognize their own. You become a reference point for what's possible, but this isn't about being a teacher or preacher. Jung warned against the inflation of believing you're meant to wake others up. The ripple effect happens through embodiment, not evangelism. You live your integrated truth, and those ready for their own integration will feel the invitation. The ultimate realization is that we're all mirrors for each other. Every person reflects some aspect of the collective human shadow. Every interaction offers an opportunity for greater consciousness.